Welcome. Okay, recording started. Great. Okay, welcome to the keynote session today. I'm Zhaogang Song from the Johns Hopkins Carey Business School. It's my great pleasure and honor today, actually, to introduce our keynote speaker, Wei Xiong. Wei is currently the Trumbull Bull Adams Professor of Finance and Professor of Economics at Princeton University. I'm going to start with the services he has been doing to the profession. I'm going to go this way because I feel like maybe we'll be totally overwhelmed by looking at various fundamental contributions. And then we forgot the services and efforts he has been putting on servicing our profession. But I'll be very quick. We had served as the finance department editor at the management science from 2009 to 2011, and is currently serving as a co-editor at the Journal of Finance. And he also organized numerous important conferences pushing the research frontier, including the conferences on behavior economics, asset pricing, commodity markets, and Chinese economy most recently. Moving on to his research, I wanted to summarize his research with just one or two keywords, but it's impossible to do so. I tried very hard. I can't do this simply because he had made fundamental contributions in multiple areas, both theoretical works and empirical works. So I just managed to put his works into a few categories using like a mixture of the economic channels and the markets he studied. Roughly, with research falls into asset pricing, behavior finance. Number one, capital market frictions and financial crisis. Number two, Chinese economy and financial markets. Number three, and recently, Fintech and the data economy. Number four. Please note that this is just not a simple list of the research field, like what I do on my own CV. So I do list various research fields in my CV, but that's more like a Christmas wish list. So what we have achieved so far is like a full-blown research agenda on each of these different categories. And there are important and fundamental contributions on each of these research agenda that we just most people want to read and actually read them over and over again. So I'll just give one example from my personal experience. So I learned his research on speculative bubbles from my PhD classes. And then I look into the details of those research in the first few years after graduate school when I was still working for the Federal Reserve, trying to understand the 2008 crisis. And recently I went back to those papers. I even learned more when I was trying to understand, the recent market events regarding the GameStop, Robinhood, so on and so forth. Not surprisingly, such impactful research has won him like various research awards, including the Smith-Braden Award, so on and so forth. Over the last few years, research has been going into the direction of trying to push the frontier of the Chinese economy and capital markets. He has done various important works on China equity market, China corporate bond market, and even the Chinese economic growth. And he edited the handbook of the China financial system, which is the most important source for many economists, Chinese economists, non-Chinese economists included, to understand what's going on in the China financial system. Okay. And, over the last recent years, he's also been pushing the research frontier regarding the new development of the economy, the Fintech and the data economy, which is exactly the research he's gonna share with us today. So we're gonna go to the keynote speech. But before we speak, let me just say that we're gonna have two ways for you to ask questions. As we speak, you can ask questions by typing in your questions or raise your hands. I'll keep track of the questions whenever is a good time I feel we can pause Wei and ask him a few questions. I may unmute you, or I may read the questions myself. At the end of the keynote speech, we can have more people to ask questions together. Without further ado, I'll turn the floor over to Wei to give us the insights on data privacy and fintech. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Sockin, for the very extensive and general introduction. It's my great pleasure here to use this opportunity to say something about my new interest on data economy and fintech. I'm sure everybody in the room noted this booming fintech industry that's been really taking off in last decade or so. Largely powered by rapid development of big data techniques and increasingly accessible consumer data. Various reviews and summary reports have been written. I quoted this one here by Franklin Allen, the co-author, as well as by Lohan Academy, a new think tank organized by M Financial Group. So according to all of these reports, they recognize the increasingly use of alternative and unconventional data that manage to help improve credit access and promote financial inclusion. We have also, this, very large academic literature recognizing many of the developments, right? Even traditional banks are, getting used to using internet-based banking and investment services. We also see many a large wave of peer-to-peer lending platforms across many countries, including the US, China, and many other countries. Mobile payment and the fast payment systems are really taking off, in particularly in China and India. And even though less so in the US, but they're also being increasingly being used. Building on top of that, we also seen so-called big tech lending programs, powered by these mobile payment systems in China and in India. So really, sort of the financial industry is going over many changes. I would also, simultaneous to these changes, there's also very notable blockchain revolution with the newly developed distributed ledger technology, which made decentralization record keeper really feasible and effective. And of course, this technology really gained worldwide popularity, largely due to the sensation of Bitcoin, right? Perhaps because of this, we have seen thousands of cryptocurrencies and the initial coined offerings in the last few days. According to some statistics, over 4,000 cryptocurrencies are already in existence, not including many already failed, actually, by 2020. With all this new technology, there's also a new sort of agenda many are calling for decentralization of finance. And of course, many central banks around the world nowadays are really thinking hard about whether to issue a central bank digital currency. So all of these are happening, and perhaps will reshape the financial system across the world in the very near future. And it's easy to argue that, underlining all of this new development is data, especially data sharing, right? Some macroeconomists already arguing data can be potentially a third factor of the macroeconomy in addition to labor and capital, right? And they are arguing that data sharing make data non-rivalry because data can be used by one user and then used by many users without affecting others, right? And this means increasing return to scale and so on. So very bright future ahead, right? But at the same time, many are also recognizing that the privacy concerns are becoming more and more important, right? As confirmed by the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, enacted by the European Union in 2018. In the US, the state of California also put together its own Consumer Privacy Act in 2020, right? So clearly, sort of, there's a growing reckoning of the importance of privacy, data privacy. So I've been trying sort of to, there are many questions opened up with all this new development. So I've been working on this related issues in last few years. I thought I would use this opportunity to sort of discuss 3 of my own studies here. I listed all of them here. So due to the time, perhaps I would focus on the first one. This is an empirical study aiming to understand what are consumers' privacy preferences and how do they make data sharing choices, which is sort of these are the fundamental issues really to in order to understand data sharing. I also have 2 loosely related theoretical papers trying to understand how data privacy regulation may affect the consumers, like the GDPR or the CCPA. And also another theoretical model trying to connect the blockchain revolution to data privacy concerns. In fact, actually, one could argue the popularity of all these cryptocurrencies actually have a deep connection to the concern about the privacy, especially concern about the platforms abusing their control of vast consumer data. I will get to the 2 models at the very end, but only very briefly. The plan today is mostly, I want to use this opportunity to share some simple observations in the data about how consumers view data privacy. So this is a new paper on the data privacy paradox and digital demand, joint work with Long Chen and Yadong Huang at the Luohan Academy, and also Sumiao Ouyang, currently a student at Princeton. So I literally just put the paper actually loaded onto my website this morning. So if you are interested, you can find the paper on my website. The central questions for this study is about understanding consumers' privacy preference. Despite this importance, actually, we know very little about it. Perhaps as evidenced by this widely discussed paradox, right? The so-called data privacy paradox. Economists had noted before that there appear to a very curious disconnect between what consumers say about their data privacy and what they do, right? So consumers often say in surveys they're really concerned about data privacy, but yet we see them share their personal data either freely or at a very small cost. In the recent study by Susan Acey and the co-authors, it's a survey. They did a survey of MIT students, right? Asked them for their personal information at the benefit of a free pizza. So to their surprise, many actually did. So this sort of shows that, right? People seems to, on one hand say they care about their data privacy, but on the other hand, it doesn't seem so when they decide, when it comes actually for them to share the data, they seem to happy to share that anyway, right? So this data privacy paradox is often interpreted as consumer perhaps not being really serious about their privacy, or maybe their survey responses are simply not reliable, right? So these are all possible. But understanding this is really important if we want to put all this privacy governance on a solid foundation, right? So that's why we took on this exercise. We're going to examine this paradox by combining survey and behavior data of a sample of Alipay users. Many of you probably know this, Alipay. This is a very popular platform. It's most known as a payment platform, but on the other hand, it also has many other things. It has over 900 million active users currently in China. So on the screen, you can see this is the front page of one of my collaborators, Alipay front page. At the very top, so here, this is the payment function part. So if you want to pay someone, you can use these buttons here. The middle part here these are actually a bunch of frequently used third-party mini programs. They're basically third-party programs on the Alipay platform that allows users to use a variety of third-party digital services. Like here, this one here, this is Are You Hungry by name. So this is a service that allows you to make a takeout order. This one here is municipal service. This one here is hotel booking. This one is movie ticket. And this one here is Didi. This is like Uber taxi ride. So each of these, actually, there are over 2 million third-party mini programs on Alipay platform. Each requires authorization of data sharing at the initial entry of a user. So until you authorize sharing certain requested data, you can get into the program and start to use the services. And there's substantial variation in the kind of services offered, as you can see from these examples. And there are also quite a bit of variation in what kind of information being requested. Usually, this information requested are necessary for using the services, right? If you need to, use the Didi, this is the taxi service, you need to share your location, your name, and your, payment information and all that, right? So in order to really to use this, but some others are quite simpler. Some will ask you for just simply your nickname or just your photo picture. So some are quite innocuous, but some other requests can be quite sensitive. Okay. So with all this variation, this allows us sort of to examine how people, all these Alipay users, make their data sharing choices in order to use these digital services. So this is a quite nice setting for that purpose. So in July 2020, we circulated the survey through this middle box, this message box on the front page of Alipay to over 2 million Alipay users. In the end, 27,000 of them clicked on the survey. About half of them eventually completed the survey. So this basically is our sample for this study. And what's nice is that because we are working with Luohan Academy, which is sort of affiliated with Alipay, so we are able to actually match these survey responses with the respondents' behavior data inside Alipay, including how many data sharing authorization they agreed, and actually how often they use this authorized mini program, and so on. Okay, so this allows us really to understand how the trade-off privacy versus their use of these mini programs. Right. So let me quickly summarize responses to a few key survey questions. So the first one on the screen here is the key one. Are you concerned about the negative impacts caused by information shared to mini programs in Alipay? There are three choices: very concerned, concerned, and not concerned. Okay, so about 46% of the respondents said they are very concerned, 39% concerned, and only 15% not concerned. So as you can see, over 85% of the respondents stating that either concerned or very concerned. This high proportion actually is very consistent with also the survey had been shown in the literature. Okay. So later I'm going to compare these three groups, right? So those concerned one, not concerned one, or very concerned one, how do they share their data with all these mini programs? Okay. And we also asked them some questions. What privacy issues are you concerned about when using mini programs in Alipay, right? So this is a respondent can click on multiple choices here. So the most important one here is the regard data leakage and data security. 86% of them think this is the most important issue in the mind. And price discrimination by merchants. This is a favorite of economists actually. in the large literature out there studying privacy, why it doesn't matter? They economists usually is because sharing data allows seller to figure out your reservation willingness to pay, right? So and thus to discriminate buyers. So however, in our sample, only 21% of the Alipay users believe that this is sort of the most important concern. Another one is seductive advertising and the temptation consumption. 49% of them believe this is actually relevant. Okay, and only 5% select the other. Means actually these three are actually captured most of the concerns. Okay, all right. So let me quickly mention the data we're going to use. As I mentioned, what's nice about this, we can actually know how these respondents are actually doing in Alipay, right? How many data authorization they have done. So in the sample, on average, each respondent authorized 11.37 mini programs during the 1 year period before the survey. Okay, in the 1 year period, 11 they authorized. Okay, they actually visited about 15, authorized 11, during the 7 year period before the survey, actually 48% of them actually had canceled at least one authorization. Okay. But in the 1 year period before the survey, on average, each respondent canceled 0.26. So later, I'm actually going to use how often they cancel this authorization as another way to look at how much they're concerned about their privacy. Okay, so the cancellation rate during the 1 year period is relatively small, 4%. Okay. And we also know how often they use these mini programs. So this number I won't get into for now. So now let me quickly mention how do we think of data sharing when the user initially showed up to a mini program, right? So there's a choice. Do you want to share your data to use the service provided by the mini program? So it's a very simple way to think about this. As econ, we think about a trade-off, right? What's the cost and what's the benefit, right? So of course, the cost is the cost of sharing your data. This is the privacy concern, right? So let's think of a sort of a user I versus another mini program J. So really the cost can be mutual, right? So this user side component, the CI, if I'm very concerned about sharing my data, and the CJ, so how much data I need to share with this mini program, right? And on the benefit side, I'm maybe a heavy user, so then I use benefit more. And there's another, the mini program component. This is a very powerful mini program that offer really beneficial services, right? Versus another less essential mini program. So then sort of for the user really sort of is the benefit larger than the cost, right? So you can see, well, so on the user side, there are these user side components, right? Benefit versus cost. And there are also many program side effect, sort of the service provided by the mini program versus the data requested by the program, right? So, a simple hypothesis, this is how I started, right? For a user who is really concerned about privacy, he should be more reluctant to authorize data sharing, right? Because the personal cost side is high, right? Cost of sharing data can be high for such a user. So such a user should be more reluctant to share data, right? So is this the case? So with this in mind, so this is the way usually sort of how people view this, right? So then we end up with the data privacy paradox. So among the three groups I mentioned earlier, right? So 46% survey respondents say they're very concerned about data sharing. 39% they are concerned, and only 15% not concerned. So now let's look at just look at the raw data. How many data authorization they agreed during this 1 year period before the survey? Okay, so this is a very concerned group. So they authorize, the orange bar here is the number of authorization, okay? So 11.3, okay? So the middle group here, so these are the concerned respondents, 11.5. And the right one, sort of these are the unconcerned respondents, 11.2. So basically, there's not much difference here, really, right? On average, so these three groups authorize about roughly the same number of data sharing. Data sharing with the same number of mini programs out there, right? Roughly 11.5, 11.2, right? So very small difference. So this is sort of the paradox, right? Those who say you are really concerned, why do you share about the same number as the other who say they're not concerned, right? And we can actually be more serious about it in the regression exercise control for various things, right? So this is a regression, a user level regression. I put these two groups, concerned group, concerned dummy, or very concerned, right? And the benchmark here is unconcerned group, right? And we can control for their digital experience, basically how long they sign up to the Alipay and their actual age, right? And also we can control for the city fixed effect. Alipay may be more popular in some city than some others, and also gender fixed effect and so on. It doesn't really matter. So basically there's no difference, okay? On the other hand, the digital experience and age, of course, matter to, the longer experienced people authorize more and the older people authorize less and so on, right? So these all make sense. But on the other hand, what they say, the concerned or very concerned doesn't really matter. And we can do even more. We can look at the user mini program pair, sort of across all the possible pair between user and all this mini program out there. So in each pair, which is authorized, so we can control for a digital experience age, and also more important, we can control for mini program fixed effect, meaning some mini program offer more powerful service, or they request more information, can all be absorbed by the fixed effect here, right? But despite all of this, doesn't really matter. Still, there's no difference across these groups. So this is basically the paradox, right? Somehow, in terms of the how much data authorization they agree, there's no difference across these different groups. So which is puzzling, right? So that's why sort of in the public debate about governance, privacy governance, this issue often comes up, right? Are they really serious about the privacy? If so, why do they, why we can see any difference in the data sharing we see in the data, right? So, to understand this, maybe an obvious argument, maybe the survey responses is just too noisy and, just unreliable, right? So we can actually validate this, because actually we do observe various action, a user might take to protect their privacy, such as canceling previous authorization, such as change their default setting in Alipay. So these are actions they have to make conscious choice to do, to protect their own privacy, right? Do we see sort of those who say they are very concerned or concerned, do we see them more likely to cancel some authorization, or do we see them more likely to change their default setting? The default settings usually make each user as transparent and visible to others as possible, right? So, the fact that someone goes to change the default setting signal, actually the guy really care, right? So here actually we do see that. So, so here actually we see very significant difference here. Very concerned do more likely to, cancel some authorization and also change their privacy settings and so on, right? So in that sense, actually, the survey responses are credible. Even individually, of course, they're all noisy, but at the group level, actually, it is credible, right? Okay, so in that sense, we can validate these survey responses. But then we still left with this paradox, right? Could it be? So despite them being concerned, why they are sharing the data anyway with all these mini programs, right? Right. So let's go back to the simple framework I put up there, right? So the benefit minus the cost, right? So there are two components on the user side. One is the benefit for this user from using this mini program versus the cost of sharing the data with this mini program, right? If these two components are independent, yeah, of course, more concerned users should be more reluctant to, share the data, right? But on the other hand, these two components actually, the benefit and the cost, they might be correlated, right? So if they are correlated, then perhaps it's easy to understand, right? If somehow, private concerned users also benefit more from using mini programs, then maybe it's easier to understand. Does that make sense? Right? Okay. So then this motivates sort of a second hypothesis we want to test. Do privacy concerned user actually benefit more from using mini programs, right? So I mean, this hypothesis is a little bit, I mean, I didn't expect to push it this way, but this seems like at this point, necessary thing to examine, okay? So, as I said, so what's nice
Wait,
about it
do you mind stopping for a minute?
Okay.
I think there are a few relevant questions, especially about your survey data. I'll allow them starting from Lian to ask a question directly.
Okay.
Lian, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah,
Hi,
good to see you, Wei. Yeah, great paper. So actually, part of my question already addressed by your previous slide. So I have a few questions. The first one is, so you have information about the background of those respondents, how rich they are, how to their education background. So whether we have a sense, so whether those richer people or more educated people more concerned about the privacy. And you have a slide showing, so you control this and you see that's a kind of sort of irrelevant of those control variable. So in the literature, whether the literature talk about privacy paradox, whether they have controlled this kind of control variables. This is the number one question. My second one, when we talk about this kind of privacy requirement, so I'm not sure whether the respondents really read into the details of this requirement. For example, according to my own experience, sometimes those many programs ask me to say, okay, we are going to require you this kind of data or that kind of data. I didn't pay attention. I just click yes and then pass on. Because there's a lot of information there. I have to go into the detail, the small font, the numbers. Actually, I didn't pay attention to that. Although there is potential variation across the different mini programs, maybe from the perspective of users, they treat them the same. They just because they didn't care, they don't read it. So how to control that in the analysis? These are the two broad questions.
Okay. Okay, so these are very important questions. First, about your first question about the background information, we do know quite a bit of, we do have quite a bit of information about the users. Some are more complete than some others. So that's in the regression analysis we control for digital experience, age, city, and gender. We do have education and some other information, but those information are often inferred by Alipay. So this is sort of inside not necessarily provided by the user. So then those information actually are more incomplete. So we could use, actually we tried that. It just will lead to a smaller sample. So in the end, for the sake, I mean, with the current sort of controls, we can actually keep almost 100% of the survey respondents. So that's why we can put more. The more we put in, just sample going to be smaller, but it doesn't change the result really. It's not because of any background. So this is actually pretty salient finding. And in fact, actually, you might argue, so this survey sample, tend to be more active user, right? Because active users are more likely to complete this survey and end up in our sample. We even did another sort of a fully random draw sample, and even greater, 100,000 random users. We did the same exercise. So those users are clearly less active, but actually we find very similar things. We don't have their surveyed, privacy concerns, but we can use whether they change their privacy settings as a measure, and we find actually exactly the same thing. So this is actually very robust phenomenon out there, which is sort of very surprising, right? So I still find this surprising in many ways, but nevertheless, I think we have our explanation here. Regarding your second question is about whether in authorization users know about the sort of what's they pay attention to carefully read, right? I am totally sympathetic to this. They may not read the fine print, but they do know what is being requested, right? I just want your nickname versus I actually want your payment information, your national ID number, and all that. You actually have to sit down and type it, right? So some of that. So in some sense, for those part, people will miss it, right? So, but that, and also sort of to the extent that they share sort of on average 11 and visit 15 each year. So this is not as infrequent as we usually think, right? I'm not the active user, I don't do that, but at least people in our sample actually do this actually fairly regularly at a monthly basis, right? So they do know quite a bit about the trade-off here in a sense. Okay.
Thank you. This is very helpful. Thank you.
Great. I think there is another question from Yiming, but it looks like the question has been answered. He already got the pattern. So Yiming, do you want to still ask a question or additional questions?
Thank you. Yes, the question is being answered by Xiong. I guess then I put in my second comment. I'm thinking like, what is the channel making the benefits and costs positive?
Yeah, that's a great question. I will definitely get to that. You wait a few slides. I will get there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe last question by Hangjie.
Okay.
Hey, Xiong, thank you, Zhao. A quick question. One is, can you separately identify benefits and cost? And two, and if I interpret very concerned and less concerned as part of the cost, I was just wondering if you estimate cost from the choice behavior and how that compares to their answers about very concerned and less concerned and so on.
Right. So I will try our best, right? Nothing's perfect, but survey clearly asked them, are you concerned? So this is about the cost side, right? But the benefit side, so this is the slides exactly I'm going to show you. So we use actually how often they use their authorized mini programs. We can count how many active days they spend in each mini program and how many times they launch the mini program, how many pages they visit in the mini program, and so on. So we have 4 different measures. So these are clearly about the demand side, right? Because presumably sort of the more useful mini program you use more, right? Otherwise, why would you waste your time to do it, right? So here, across all these measures, it's the same. So it's pretty clear, right? So the more concerned people actually tend to use more. And the very concerned people use more than the unconcerned people. Oh, sorry. Very concerned people use more than concerned people. And the concerned people use more than unconcerned people. Actually pretty monotonic, right? So those who say they're really concerned, they actually also use more. so this is sort of at the very robust, that we can control also things, experience, age, mini program fixed effect, the year month fixed effect, the city fixed effect, gender fixed effect, all of that doesn't really matter. Okay. So this is sort of a very curious pattern, right? So those who say they're concerned about the data, at the same time they use more. Does that make sense? So this is sort of this is sort of lead to even a more puzzling question: why don't the privacy concerns deter digital demands, right? So as financial economists, we're familiar with sort of the concept of risk aversion, right? So initially, when we think of a privacy concern, this is like risk aversion, right? Risk aversion going to deter risky investment, right? If you are risk averse, you are not going to devote 80% of your portfolio into risky stocks, right? But here somehow, privacy concerned people actually they use more. so this is sort of the curious part of this, right? This suggests, privacy concern probably different from risk aversion, right? But then why, right? This is Yiming's question, right? So the way actually, eventually we figure out maybe we raised the question wrong, right? So who said that you have risk aversion, or you have privacy concern first, then think about you want to have a digital demand, right? Maybe it's the other way around, is that, people gradually develop their privacy concern as they use these digital applications, right? The more you use it, eventually you realize, actually, I'm not really concerned about my data because because I kept using this, right? So, it's like a New York subway, right? I visit New York occasionally, right? I ride the subway, which is pretty nice. I would never worry about, security in the subway, right? But for those who actually ride the subway every day, and especially those really heavy riders who actually have to ride the subway at midnight, right? They might actually really worry about security, right? Does that make sense? So, right? So in that sense, sort of maybe a more natural way to think about the privacy concern is the other way around. So privacy concern might be a byproduct of using digital applications, right? Those who actually use more end up being more concerned, right? right? So then it's easy to understand why, those actually say they're concerned, but they share so many, right? And actually they use more, right? So I think sort of this is sort of eventually I convinced me maybe this is the right way to think about. But nevertheless, sort of okay, this is the quick way I can show you. So if we look at the sort of how those who say they're concerned or unconcerned fraction vary across digital experience. So you can see actually there's a pattern here, right? So those actually use Alipay more actually longer. So they register longer. Of course, I mean the long history of register in Alipay is not necessarily the precise measure of experience per se, but nevertheless it reflects something, right? So there's this pattern here, right? Nevertheless, really to convince us, heavy users actually are really sort of more concerned. Maybe this way leads to another prediction, okay, another hypothesis. Are heavy users of digital application more likely to cancel data sharing authorization, right? So, those heavy users, typically we think heavy users, they find this mini program more useful. Why would they actually more likely to cancel previous data authorization, right? But on the other hand, if heavy user also gradually develop more privacy concerns, so then that's possible, right? Does that make sense? So in some sense, so that we view this as a, sort of a additional test really to validate this, this argument, okay? So now actually we can look sort of in our data, these users, so the cancellation rate of their previous authorization during the 1 year period before the survey, right? And we use two different measures of activeness, so the active month ratio and another sort of a monthly active sessions and so on. Doesn't matter which measure we use. You see sort of the pretty positive, okay? We can do this at the user mini program level. So for all the existing sort of user versus mini program pair, so the propensity of one previous authorization gets canceled during this 1 year period. So, actually, the heavy users actually the cancellation propensity is greater. So this suggests actually it does confirm the fact that heavy users are more concerned, right? Does that make sense? Okay, all right. So this is about I want to quickly show you here. So basically, by looking at this, I mean, we do more in the paper, but here, let me just show you. This is sort of you get the main point, right? So we confirm this curious data privacy paradox, right? Heavily concerned users actually do not seem to be more reluctant in authorizing data sharing, right? But what really expands this data privacy paradox? This is not because of unreliable survey responses. On average, actually, at the group level, those responses are credible, right? Instead, we find another curious pattern. Users with strong privacy concerns also tend to have stronger demand for digital services, right? So this to us reflects the fact that users are likely to develop privacy concerns as a byproduct in the process of using digital applications. We know digital economy is new, fintech is new, so right. So all of these are new phenomena. So people are gradually learning their, starting to learn to enjoy using those digital applications at the same time as a byproduct. They will gradually develop privacy concerns, right? So that means our privacy concern may intensify with the deepening of the digital economy. And this will actually eventually limit the increasing return of data sharing, right? So as I mentioned earlier, right? So, macroeconomists really aiming for, increasing return to scale at some point for this really to drive the economy. But then, the privacy concern eventually will kick in, right? Maybe at this point, most people haven't really become so concerned yet, but this will come later, right? So in that sense, there's really strong need for better data privacy protection, which can hopefully enable more data sharing, right? Because data sharing is really essential, for all this big data technique to really be powerful, right? So I think sort of this is what we learned so far. I don't know, Zhaogang, can you give me a few more minutes? I want to summarize.
Oh yes, please do, please do.
Okay, so So I have been working on some theoretical front. So here's a paper trying to build a theoretical model to understand how data privacy regulation might affect data sharing of consumers. So this is the paper, Data, Privacy, and Temptation, with Zhuang Liu and Mike Sockin. So this is a model. At first, this is a model of privacy preference through temptation utility, right? So instead of focusing on price discrimination I mentioned earlier, we're trying to develop privacy preferences through personal weakness. Right, rational consumer usually prefer a larger menu because you can always choose the best in the larger menu, right? So larger menu is often preferred for rational consumer, but actually for consumers with weakness, especially with a weak self-control, larger a menu with temptation good. If I'm a smoker, I cannot help myself. You put the cigarette in the menu, that hurts me, right? So in that sense, sort of the decision scientists developed this temptation utility actually can be quite useful for immediately provide a way to derive preference for privacy to the extent that consumers with weak self-control may not want to be targeted by online sellers of a temptation good, right? So if I'm addicted to gambling, I would want to hide away from gambling site, right? If they know, if they can find me, so then it would be very hard for me to stay away. So in that sense, protecting privacy is about protecting my own personal weakness, right? So building on this privacy preference, we have a model to study trade-off data sharing. The positive side is that sharing my data allow a better matching with normal good. I like many other things, the normal consumption good, right? So sharing my data allow those sellers to find me and give me what I want without much effort. But on the other hand, the data sharing also expose weak-will consumer to temptation good sellers. So this is the trade-off, okay? And such data sharing does come with both positive and negative externalities. For data privacy regulation, it's really about compromising the positive versus negative externality, right? So, and we can actually do some simple exercise to provide welfare ranking of GDPR, CCPA for sharing versus no sharing at all. In fact, actually, a lot depends on how severe this kind of temptation, personal weakness is. So, and in addition to this, earlier I mentioned sort of, this blockchain revolution, right? I argue that actually this blockchain revolution actually might have something to do with the privacy as well. Decentralized, thousands of cryptocurrency, crypto tokens out there, many of them achieving to accomplish so-called decentralization through tokenization, right? So, this is maybe regarded as a way to resolve the conflict between the platform and its users. We know, owners of conventional platforms, they have control for massive user data, right? But at the same time, they cannot pre-commit not to abuse their control of the data, right? So, of course, Google unlikely to do very crazy things, but for some platform, when their earnings not doing well and when their business, profits are not going well, they might actually take a more aggressive action to take advantage of the control of the data. This can be a worry, right? So in some sense, the popularity of Bitcoin, at least the initial argument is about that, right? Maybe we cannot trust the central bank, with the, important trust of issuing currency, right? So because they might actually be tempted at some point to issue too many at the expense of users, right? So if you cannot trust the central bank, so then how can you trust some companies actually with control of your data, right? So what's nice about this distributed ledger technologies is possible to provide alternative to equity financing, right? Developer now can get paid by issuance of tokens and coins and delegate controls of the platform to a set of pre-coded algorithms, right? With no one taking ownership and control, and that automatically resolve the pre-commitment problem, right? So we have a model with Sockin to study this tension between network effect and decentralization. What's nice about tokenization is that it's solved this, pre-commitment problem through decentralization. But on the other hand, without the owners, who are going to subsidize participation, which is essential for building up a network effect, right? Because for all of these digital platforms, network effect is essential, right? So this is basically the trade-off. With this trade-off, we can show maybe tokenization is appealing for some platforms, and in particular platform maybe with ex-ante relatively weak fundamentals, because this kind of platform actually pre-commitment problem is more severe. Okay, yeah, that's all I want to say. So I put this together, right? So data sharing and the privacy concerns are likely to reshape the future of the digital economy as well as the fintech industry. It might well be actually the future of financial industry altogether, right? So here, we took some initial effort to study sort of consumers' privacy concerns, right? So despite the appearance of no relationship between data sharing and the privacy concern, actually there's actually very deep connection, right? So, but the connection is really about privacy concern as a byproduct of consumers using digital applications, and the concerns are actually likely to intensify in the future years, and this makes this even more important for us to develop proper data sharing and data privacy protection mechanisms in place. Right, so one obvious way is to resolve these concerns through regulation, but the also externality, right? So especially the social nature of data sharing make this regulation rather challenging. Alternatively, we can use the new technology itself to resolve this problem, right? Like tokenization. This is a useful effort. But of course, I think sort of a lot of tricky issues need to be resolved. Carefully thought out. I think so that there are many open questions for us as a profession to study. Okay, that's what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the great talk. So I think we can now open up for the broader discussion. If you have a question, raise your hand and I'll type in or give me a signal. I'll allow you to talk. I'll start with Prabhala's question. He cannot speak, so I'll ask for him. I think he's asking in general, what is special in the data privacy issues in finance or financial data compared to data privacy in a more broad level, like the more economic, the whole economy level, or like in other dimensions?
I see. This is a very interesting question. Personally, I don't think actually, the financial data is so different from, other kind of data, right? So I think in the digital economy, perhaps so the financial data are actually more intensive, right? A lot more data from financial applications. But other than that, actually, I think the phenomenon itself is quite general. So, for the mini program we study in Alipay, actually, some of these applications are financial applications, but actually many others are not. So really mixing them together. So I don't think actually the phenomenon, this paradox itself actually differ across these different applications. So it's very similar in that sense. So that's why I think this is a more general question. But of course, sort of to the extent that many of the financial applications require a lot of data, right? Like credit. So, right? So, this is actually where a lot of progress has been made in recent years, right? Alipay actually made a lot of effort, progress on that by extending credit to many consumers previously not that accessible, with finance not accessible to them, right? Because they are outside the typical financial coverage of the typical financial institutions. But because of the data accumulated in the payment system, actually now they're being covered. So I think sort of this is really where the data help, right? So for this clearly, in this application, you see data clearly helps. But to make this kind of applications even more powerful. Eventually, people will also start. Maybe at some point, they will also ask the question: should Alipay automatically, get sort of use my data, right? So even inside the Alipay system, right? So these are the questions. At this point, I don't think consumers are worried yet.
Okay. I'll move on to Maria. So I think you can talk now.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so my question is about, it's only like a thought I had about what you said about data privacy concerns. So I guess that we may think of this about why, if you are concerned, what do you share? No, I think first, maybe this is an entry cost you have to pay to get access to those apps. And I think I want to think about these data privacy things like an investor. And that was what I wrote in the panel. So I think that all investors prefer high liquidity, high liquid assets. And I get that those apps, maybe they are part of sort of the most used ones. So do you have to pay an entry cost? But then maybe if I have some kind of concerns or not, sharing concerns could be equivalent to the risk aversion I have, right, in the market. One thing is that I decide to invest in an asset. Another thing is the risk aversion I may have about what is going on with this asset in the future or actually in the present. So I guess that actually we don't know exactly, probably the most risk averse sharing concern people, maybe they are less willing to share data in exceed of what is needed. So they pay the entry cost, but then that's it. So I would like also, I don't know if you have information about the intensity of the use of that. If in exceed of what everyone have to do, they do something more in sharing information.
Maria, thanks for the question. So let me make sure I understand your question. I think the first part of your question is about there's another ways for those concerned users to to address their concern. Instead of direct sharing the data, maybe they can say I pay actually for use the application rather than for sharing the data. Is that what you have in mind?
No, maybe you do what everyone else do, because this is the average return that you are expecting. So you invest on average the same than everyone else, but then your risk aversion, your sharing concerns is going to determine how intense is the use up above that level if I have to share an extra amount of data with private data to the market. So I was more concerned about not only whether I'm using the app or not, if I install it and share this information or not, but what is the use I do above that minimum level. I don't know if I make myself understandable. Probably not, I'm sorry.
Okay, I think there are, so I also have questions regarding like what we really mean by data privacy. Cost, I guess you're trying to think about the cost or something like that. It's kind of very deeper question we need to think about. Maybe we can talk more, but I guess we can still take one question.
Sockin, please pass on your Maria's question to me later.
I will do.
There's some deep issues. Clearly, I'm not sure I fully
right. Yes, I will do that. Right. So I think we can take the last question, like to keep it a minimum. Lian, go ahead.
Thank you, Zhao, for giving me this second opportunity. Great presentation. I have two short questions relating to the first paper. For the first paper, I really like the approach of connecting the survey data with the real kind of action data. You see what they see and better confirm what they do. This approach is really fantastic. I also like the message that you see the B and C correlated might explain the paradox, privacy paradox. But I have a question kind of elaborating Heng Jie's questions, whether you can do something more structured, right? The information that in your data allow you to estimate the correlation coefficient between B and C and give people a quantitative idea how exactly they are correlated. So the more like a calibration, this kind of analysis. I know kind of sort qualitatively, I know this correlation can conceptually address that paradox. I just want to know how much. And then number two is kind of, so this is you positively address this paradox, and then normatively having this B and C correlated, what would be the implication for regulation, for regulators, the welfare? So how can this correlation between B and C help us to better design the regulation rules? So the kind of positive on the net,
Right.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think about the quantitative assessment of this, I think that's a great question. So this is perhaps for the next step. So first we want to understand the reduced form pattern in the data, right? So once we get in accumulate enough about this, we can move on to this next step. About the right way to address this. This is also that's ultimately the important question we want to understand. I think sort of there are different ways to do this. One is about regulation. It's actually perhaps there are also other ways to address this. One is regulation. We all agree, but regulation is tricky. Because it's not about the individual, right? I think most models in this literature so far, it's all about the recognizing importance of the externality, because one consumer's data sharing affect other consumers, right? So when the platform know my type actually tells the platform about other potential consumers, right? So this is where sort of the regulation can be tricky. But at the same time, I think there might be other effort one can do to address this issue, right? This also call for data market. So instead of the current model is about consumers exchange data for free services, right? But perhaps actually at some point that those really concerned user would be willing to pay directly for the service rather than use their data, right? So that actually at some point, actually, at this point, no one would want to consider because it's free. And their concern, actually, this is where I think perhaps their privacy concern not really severe enough yet. But they would, the concern would become so severe at some point that actually somebody would be willing to pay. And that model actually might become more popular, right?
Great. Thank you all for participation. Especially great thanks to Wei for sharing the insights on the new data economy. So I think we're officially ending the session. Again, I hope to see most of you in person, and thanks a lot for coming here.
Thank you, Sockin, for chairing the session. It's my great pleasure. Very glad to see everyone here. Hope to see all of you in person at some point.